what we need now is an actual plan of action. So Theresa May has said it's not acceptable and she doesn't want to see this happening anymore, but that's probably going to require some investigation, some legislation and some action on the government's behalf. And it also requires some action on women's behalf. So if you now know that you're working at an employer where the average pay difference is 74%, I'd be having a very serious think about whether you want to stay there and how you talk to them about that.
And how do you talk to them about that?
So the worrying thing is that we know that actually when women ask for a pay rise, they're not treated in the same way that men are. So actually, we're much nicer to men when they ask for a pay rise. When women ask, we tend to think of them as a bit grasping, a bit difficult. Even if they get the pay rise, we can still be a bit frosty with them afterwards. So what we need to do is...
When you say we...
Men and women.
So
both men and women behave differently when a woman asks for a pay rise than when a man does.
I had a female boss once who said that, in her experience, the men in the office came up probably once every 4 months. She'd get each one coming up, I want a pay rise, these are the reasons why. And she'd go, no, go away, you're still in development, or you know, whatever they said to Carrie Grace, that sort of thing, you know. And she just said the difference is the men get the pay rise, in her opinion, because they just keep asking. Whereas she would say the same thing to a woman, go away and prove. She'd not come back for a year. Because, you know, you'd sort of go, oh, God, I'm not good enough. So you go away. And said, I can just bat women away. You know, I can just push them away by going, you're not good enough yet for another pay rise. And literally won't come back.
But we know that's because for women, when we treat them differently when they ask for a pay rise, so when we kind of in our heads go, oh gosh, she's being a bit difficult, whereas with a guy we go, of course he's asking for a pay rise, that's just what men do.
And you don't want him coming back every 3 months with the same argument. So do we have to toughen up, Michelle?
Well, we need to rewind, because these figures, you know, we're talking about banning injustices, you're talking about, you know, would you want to stay at an employer that's got these gaps? This is just ridiculous. All these figures are showing, and they have absolutely zero context to them whatsoever, is that a company pays men and women differently. It has no context whatsoever as to what
do you mean by that?
Do
you mean the
doing.
fact that, for instance, Ryanair have come back and said, hang on, the reason why there's such a big differential, because this is not about two people doing the same job and getting paid differently. This is about looking at the numbers of women and the numbers of men in the company, and they could well be doing very different jobs. For instance, Ryanair, they say they've got hundreds of pilots, predominantly men. There's only about 8 female pilots, but they have a lot of women working in other jobs, which are less paid across the board, less well paid across the board.
These figures are useful for one thing only, and that is starting a conversation. Full stop.
About what?
Well, we can have the conversations that we're having now about the kind of roles that ladies are going into or choosing. At the end of the day, it is a fact that pilots, for example, are predominantly male. You two, if you decide to be a pilot tomorrow and you want to go back to basics and do your education and choose that as a career field, you can. Nobody's stopping you. If we have a problem with the fact that men and women are choosing different roles, the only way we can do this...
Or aren't being promoted as much. That's the other issue, isn't it?
Well, we don't know if it's an issue. These figures don't tell us that. But my point
is... It is an issue. We do know it's an issue because we know that only roughly 25% of senior board-level positions are held by women. So we know it's a problem that women aren't being promoted as much.
And is this part of this, Michelle, not just sort of, in a way... You know, it embarrasses companies. It's nobody wants to be out there, whether you think there's context or not. Nobody wants to be out there going, yeah, we pay men 75% more than women.
Damaging for companies.
Nobody wants to be saying that. It's not the thing you have on a poster in your room.
Well, it's not fair, for example, that companies like Ryanair, you know, you just said yourself, you know, I wouldn't work for a company that's got this gender pay gap. So companies will now be looked at poorly based on something that's irrelevant. So, for example, if we truly have a problem that women are not choosing to be pilots, and I'm sticking with the pilot example, what we ought to do is go right back to basics of education. I work with a group of schools, UTCs, aimed at 14 to 19-year-old kids. We bring employers into the curriculum. We work really, really hard to ensure that children, men, you know, boys and girls, are looking at different careers and involving employers. So what we do is we raise aspirations of girls, and these conversations that we're having, where we're telling girls, you will be discriminated against in this company, in this sector, it's harmful to them.
But
So hang on, so you left school at 15,
Yes.
just one thing, you left school at 15. By the time you were 22, you were earning a 6-figure salary.
I was.
So you didn't wait to be asked?
No, so here's the thing. So, right, at the end, and I feel so strongly about this, my message to girls, you can have and do and be anything that you want. And yes, you're absolutely right, Harriet, there is fewer women at the top senior positions. a lot of that is to do with historically,
Please
for example.
don't say children. Please don't say it's to do with children.
Well, hang on, no. What I'm going to say is...
It might be to do with children, though, because if you can't afford childcare...
Absolutely.
And one person is taking the brunt of the
If
work...
you can't afford childcare because you're being paid unequally and you're being paid less because you're a woman and your husband is being paid more because they're a man, yes, then you do have to make that decision. That's not a choice. That's something you're being forced
Men
into
and women
through
are not
economics.
being paid unequally. If they were, it would be illegal. They're not.
They are actually.
They're
so when
not.
you look at a lot of the companies that are taking this pay gap reporting seriously, what they're doing is going beyond what's required and actually looking at the equal roles.
Just in a,
and there are gaps
in
there.
a pointer, Harry, just if you're going to work this morning or you're going to work next week and you're thinking, right, this is all out there. My employer's a bit, rubbish in this aspect. What can I do to improve my finances? Give me 3 tips that you would say to a woman this morning.
So the first thing is I would go to your boss or your HR team and say, can I have a breakdown of what the bandwidths are for my role across the board so I know where I'm being paid?
OK.
I would go and call a recruiter and say, where is paying really well? What should I be getting? What's the market rate? And I would sit down with your boss and say, look, this has come out. What does this mean for me? And what is my career progression within this company?
Okay. Well, as a lot of people be thinking, I'm just lucky to have my job. That's the trouble. Men and women. So it's very hard to go in and leverage it. But good to talk to you this morning and very good advice.